You know that sound, right? It's one of the most famous sounds ever written. Just four simple notes that have been everywhere, in concert halls, movies, commercials, for over 200 years. But what if there's more to them than just a catchy tune? So, you know the sound. But what if I told you those four notes are actually a key? A kind of secret code that unlocks not just one of the greatest pieces of music ever composed, but a whole new way of thinking about what music could even be. And here it is, what it actually looks like on the page. In music speak, we call this short, powerful idea a motif. It's famously nicknamed the fate motif, as in fate knocking at your door. And get this isn't just a cool opening. It's basically the DNA for the entire symphony. So, what is a motif, really? Well, think of it like a single Lego brick. It's this small, distinct musical idea. A composer can take that one brick, and by repeating it, changing it, and combining it in clever ways, they can build a massive, incredibly complex structure. And Beethoven? He was an absolute master builder. Now, to really understand why what he did was so revolutionary, we have to kind of jump in a time machine. We need to go back to the world Beethoven was born into. A world of powdered wigs, fancy courts, and very, very clear rules. This was the classical period. You had composers like Haydn and Mozart who were the absolute masters of their craft. And their music was all about elegance, balance, and clarity. It had a predictable structure, it was beautiful, it was refined, kind of like a perfectly manicured garden. And this comparison just makes the coming change so clear. The classical period was really all about the head. It valued balance, clarity, and order, usually for wealthy patrons. But the Romantic period, which Beethoven was about to set in motion, was a massive shift to the heart. It was all about raw emotion, personal expression, and huge drama, but for the public. And standing right in the middle of this huge musical tug-of-war was one man. A composer who had one foot planted firmly in the classical tradition that he had totally mastered, and the other stepping boldly into this wild, new, emotional territory. And here he is, Ludwig van Beethoven. I mean, just look at the intensity in his portrait. He's often described as a giant straddling two styles, and you can totally see why. See, he learned the rules of the classical era better than anyone, which gave him the power to know exactly how and when to break them for the biggest impact. But behind this incredible genius was this deep personal struggle. As his fame was taking off, his hearing was fading away. Beethoven went deaf. Just try to imagine that for a second. A composer who couldn't physically hear his own masterpieces. It forced him to stop composing from the world outside and instead compose from the incredible storm of emotion that was raging inside of him. Okay, so we've got our composer, a man of immense passion at a major turning point in history. So now, let's actually unwrap his masterpiece and see exactly how he pulled it off. How did he use those four little notes to change absolutely everything? First, we gotta understand the blueprint he was supposed to be working with. Back in the classical era, most big pieces were built using a structure called sonata form. The easiest way to think about it is like a musical story, with a really clear beginning, a middle, and an end. It breaks down pretty simply, like this. First, you have the exposition. That's where you meet the main characters, the musical themes. Then you get the development, which is where those themes go on an adventure, getting all twisted and transformed. And finally, you have the recapitulation, where the themes return home, safe and sound. It's all very orderly and satisfying. Now, Beethoven knew sonata form inside and out. But just following the blueprint, that wasn't really his style. He took that neat, orderly structure and just injected it with this raw, unpredictable power. He stretched it, he strained it, and he pushed it to its absolute breaking point. And here's exactly how he broke the rules. First, that Da-Da-Da-Da-Dum motif, it becomes an obsession. Pretty much every melody and every rhythm in the entire piece grows from that one tiny seed. Second, he blows up the development section, turning the adventure into this chaotic whirlwind that builds up the tension to a level that is almost unbearable. And then right when you're expecting a neat, tidy ending, he slams on the brakes for this shocking, lonely solo for the oboe, like a cry of individual humanity in the middle of a massive storm. So you have to understand, the premiere of this symphony in 1808 wasn't just another concert. Oh no, it was a shockwave. It was the sound of a completely new age being born. This timeline just puts it all into perspective. You've got the long, stable, classical era, then, bam, 1808, Beethoven's Fifth drops. And just a little while after, the Romantic era is in full swing.
This symphony wasn't just a product of its time, it literally helped create its time.
It's been called the ignition of the Romantic era, and that is just the perfect description. It was the spark. It showed every composer who came after him that music could be so much more than just pleasant patterns. It could be a way to express the deepest, most complicated parts of being human. And that right there is the ultimate takeaway. After the symphony, the whole purpose of music just shifted. It became a narrative art form. It was a way for a composer to tell you a story of struggle, of despair, and in the end, of triumph, all without using a single word. It became a reflection of the soul. So the next time you hear those 4 iconic notes, don't just hear a famous tune. I want you to hear the sound of rules being shattered. Hear the roar of personal expression. And ask yourself, what does fate really sound like? Maybe it sounds a little bit like that.